a really wonderful person from the UK, Hugh Newman, is featured on the Ancient Aliens History Channel television series, on the series about evidence of lost giants. And he heads an organization called, is it Megalithomania? And all of you will be required to repeat that 3 times before you leave today. But he leads tours into wonderful places like Peru. He's sort of the younger generation bringing this up, and we like to see people picking up this torch and carrying it because it's really important information. He leads this sort of event in the UK and works a lot with Graham and Andrew Collins, and he's just a wonderful person and has some really brilliant presentations to provide. And by the way, I just took Graham Hancock to his hotel room, so his flight has arrived and he will be speaking tonight. So a big Earthkeeper round of applause for Hugh Newman, please.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Very nice introduction. One of the best, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't often get that, but anyway, today I'm going to just briefly mention what I'm going to talk about today. I think the slide might give it away slightly, but there's a few more aspects to this that you may not be aware of unless you read my book. So I'm really asking the question about why did the ancients build these megalithic structures, pyramids, landscape effigies, and a huge network of alignments, ley lines, astronomical sight lines, and also secret number codes and geometric anomalies hidden within these sites all over the planet. The sheer size and scale has just not been recognized as to how important the world is and all the sites on it. And they encode fertility technologies, and to me, they represent a sign of advanced sort of evolution, really, in the prehistory, which has been maintained within these sites for us to now work with today and understand today and actually raise our consciousness. But it's not just that. There's many different aspects to this, because these were designed, these sites and this grid, as a technological machine that maintained fertility around the planet, agriculture, and, as I said already, this level of consciousness. A brief bit about myself. You've heard the introduction already, but I've been running Megalithomania since 2006, founded with John Martineau and Gareth Mills. It's a conference, and now we run tours all around the world with people like Andrew, Graham, Brian Forrester, and many others. And I've got 3 books out. The latest one is the one on the right there, Giants on Record. Now, this is what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow morning at 9:30. And that's co-written with Jim Vieira. He's the star of the Search for the Lost Giants TV show you may or may not have seen on History Channel. And I'm going to be covering that. I mean, to be honest with you, what I found, the more I research all these subjects, is that all these sites, these grids, this high technology around the planet is in fact linked with these giants. They were the ones who kind of worked and understood and developed what I'm going to be talking about today. But first, I want to introduce you, I'm sure some of you know him already, to the father of Earth mysteries, who's now passed away, unfortunately, in 2009. He was my mentor, he was my guide with all these subjects. He founded Megalithomania with us. He did a book called Megalithomania in 1983, I believe. And his name is John Michel. Does any of you know about John Michel? Are you aware of his work? Well, you may not realize this, but a lot of the information, books and ideas about Earth grids, ley lines, geometries around the planet, and Glastonbury Zodiac and many other things were developed by this gentleman, and he was really the pioneer in this subject. So I'm just going to read this little brief passage from his book, The View Over Atlantis, and this kind of gives you an overview of what we're actually going to look at in this talk. A great scientific instrument lies sprawled over the entire surface of the globe. At some point, at some period, perhaps it was over 4,000 years ago, almost every corner of the world was visited by a group of people who came with a particular task to accomplish. With the help of some remarkable power by which they could cut and raise enormous blocks of stone, they erected vast astronomical instruments, circles of erect pillars, pyramids, underground tunnels, cyclopean alignments whose course from horizon to horizon was marked by stones, mounds, and earthworks. The vast scale of prehistoric engineering is not yet generally recognized. And this is from the 1969 book, The View Over Atlantis. So big respect going out to John Michel. So here's just a little menu of some of the subjects we're going to get into. And I want to classify a couple of things here and put it into a coherent understanding, because this is quite a strange subject when you get into earth energies, you get into grids and ley lines and energy lays and geomancy and so forth. And it can become very confusing, the terminology. So I'm just going to briefly mention these just so you've got some background in it. Geomancy means the divination of the earth. And it's from ancient Greek and literally translates to foresight by earth. And it is a translation of an Arabic term, the science of the sand. Geodesy translates into division of the earth, the measure and representation of the earth. And also archaeogeodesy is about ancient place determination and the relationship between sites around the planet. Geometry is earth measurement, concerned with the questions of shape, size, relative position of figures, and properties of space. And sacred geometry is number in space, the sacred laws of earth measures and nature. There's many other aspects to sacred geometry. And then we get into the earth energies and the ley lines. And this is where people get a little bit confused, but I want to just classify this because I think this is very important. A ley or a ley line, technically they're just called lays, they're not called ley lines. It's like saying line. So a ley is the correct term, but people kind of need to classify that. It's an alignment of 4 or more ancient sites over any distance. We can be from a few miles to all the way around the world. A great earth circle is the same, but all the way around the planet. It's an alignment of sites over the surface of the earth that equally divides the earth in two. Archaeoastronomy, we've already seen examples of that with Andrew and others today. And it's the alignment and orientation of sites to the sun, moon, and stars at certain times of year, and longer cycles as well. Now, earth energy lines are about 6 feet to 20 feet wide natural yin and yang earth energies that emanate from the earth. They do tend to move in random directions, but seem to follow the course of they sort of follow around straight line alignment. So it gets a bit confusing comparing that with lays. Telluric currents alternating electric and magnetic current that form from the Earth's magnetic field and reside on the Earth's surface. They strengthen at sunrise and weaken at dusk, and they often form into spirals. And we'll be looking at some examples of all of these as we go through the lecture. And of course, Earth grids is like the overview of all these different subjects. So is there any evidence of an Earth grid around the planet? Is there any evidence that the ancients had an understanding of a global connection with sites everywhere on Earth? It does seem to be the case. And we can see one example here, which is very fascinating. It's from the Book of Enoch. That was rediscovered in 1773. And it was in obscurity for about 1,500 years before the Scottish explorer James Bruce discovered it in Ethiopia. Now, Enoch is ascribed as the great-grandfather of Noah, although modern scholars disagree and say it could be a much later book. The first part of the book describes the fall of the Watchers, the angels, etc., who fathered the Nephilim, who we're going to talk a little bit more about tomorrow. The remainder of the book describes Enoch's visit to heaven in the form of travels, visions, and dreams, and revelations. And this passage here really grabbed my attention, and this has been noted by various researchers, because basically it's describing what seems like a great survey of the earth, potentially going back many thousands of years. And it reads, "And I saw in those days how long cords were given to the angels, and they took themselves wings and flew, and they went towards the north. And I asked an angel, saying unto him, Why have they taken cords and gone off? And he replied, They have gone to measure, and these measures shall reveal all the secrets of the depths of the earth." So this was potentially written over 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, or possibly even more. And it does suggest that they were working with these surveying, at least, in prehistory. This is the famous Pires Reis map from 1513. which is a very controversial map. I think Graham may include that in his lecture tonight. But this is a series of grid lines and points you can kind of see on this map. And it was made up from 20 old charts and mappa mundi, or global maps that the Arabs called them. And it was Charles Hapgood, the University of Keene State College in New Hampshire, that concluded that ancient travelers must have sailed from pole to pole and mapped Antarctica when its coasts were free of ice, suggesting a date at least beyond 4000 BC. And this is like one of the maps that shows this prehistoric knowledge that was then, it wasn't even changed, it maintained, nothing was changed until the 1700s when longitude was worked out. And so they were using this map without change for hundreds of years. So it's quite an incredible piece of evidence that suggests a very high technology around the entire planet in prehistory. And there's this very interesting creation myth of the Hopi, which I feature in my book. And this really intrigues me. This was actually an illustration created by my brother Emmanuel for the book. And the legend states, or the creation myth states, that the creator Taiwa assigned Spider grandmother as guardian for the earth. She spat into 2 handfuls of earth, and 2 men were created who became her helpers. These 2 helpers sat in meditation to link minds. One went to the North Pole to work his special magic, to give structure and form to life. And the other went to the South Pole to say prayers. And he heard a distant, slow rhythm, the heartbeat of Taiwa, which he began to beat out on his magical drum. And when it became in harmony, a surge of life force came shooting down to Earth. It struck the navel of the Earth, the South Pole, and went down until it came to the crystal at the center of the Earth. When the sound hit the crystal, the energy shot out in all directions, channeled by the structural magic of one of the brothers. The reflected life energy then popped from the Earth's crust, bringing the planet to life. And this is where the energy is more abundant. And these sacred places are called spots of the fawn. This is a very, very old Native American tradition. But what is this? What are we talking about here? Are they talking about a very early version of the Earth grid? So before we get into grids, I want to look a little bit at Earth energies and how they're formed around the planet. The magnetic field is a key part of this. So on the surface of the Earth, fault lines, there's earthquake epicenters and geomagnetic forces, and there's also natural electrical telluric currents, a part of this great system that today we call geomancy. And more often than not, it's really now just referred to as Earth energy, but it is central to the idea of a world grid. The Earth's magnetic field is thought to derive from convection in the outer iron-rich core, combined with stirring caused by the Earth's rotation. The inner core of the Earth also rotates slightly faster than the rest of the planet, which creates energetic effects. And of course, we have the sun. It gives the Earth's magnetic field an extreme daily beating, struck by gusts of solar wind, and that's often seen as the northern lights. And this system is constantly in flux. At dawn, the magnetic field lines shrink and surge through the land, our homes, our bodies, and our brains each day. And the field weakens at night, then roars back to life every morning. This is what is thought to wake you up in the morning when these field lines surge. It's not the light coming in from the sun. So at some places, this energy is stronger. The local geology enhances these energies. And due to the effects of rocks and insulators such as chalk and the presence of water, magnetism and electrical force are 2 sides of the same coin. And a moving electrical current generates a magnetic field. And a changing magnetic field generates electric current in anything that will conduct it. So there's it sounds very complicated, but this is actually a very simple system that the Earth uses, and the ancients understood this. This is just one example of some work done by various researchers, including John Burke, who wrote the book Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty with Kaj Halberg back in 2005. And this shows the magnetic field lines around a megalithic chamber in New York State. This place is called Kent Cliffs. I'm not sure if any of you have been up that way. But what we do is we find that there are these forces. The field lines generate weak DC current in the ground. And like all electrical currents, these telluric energies do travel in some media better than others. And often the ancients would know where this was. Ground containing a high level of metal or mineral-rich water conducts these currents well. Drier or less metallic ground does not. But when these two types of land intersect, we get what is called a conductivity discontinuity. Anyone want to repeat that word? No. This is also where many ancient sites are found. They are built on these conductivity discontinuities. I should get a round of applause for saying that twice, really. But this is. Oh, thanks. Thank you. Good. I want to say it again if I need a round of applause. But this is often where we have, because you're getting fluctuations of the field lines of the magnetic currents and electrical currents, and they're switching over, you get balls of light form. And so this is where balls of light are found, these orbs, and often photographed. And bands of light, bands of what some people call plasma, are also found. And there's this one example here. This is actually from one of the chamber in Kent Cliffs. There's several in that area. Also, that you get ghost-like entities, low humming sounds, and even red lights have been witnessed and photographed coming from these chambers. The interesting thing about this place is that it's also built on a mountain made of magnetite, or iron ore. And so you're going to get this very magnetic effect combined with these conductivity discontinuities. And you have the moving water, you have the and different earth energy currents all combining to create these very sacred places or spots of the faun. It's just another example. This is in Kent Cliffs, New York State. This is in the vicinity of Clarence Farnstock State Park, and it's an old magnetite mine. And it was built deliberately in this area. Here's actually one of an orb I caught. This was a standard camera. This was not a digital camera. This is another example, and these are just on the side of the road. So if you go in there and you get affected by this magnetism and you stumble out onto the street, you will get run over. In England, we have the same kind of effects have been recorded throughout the megalithic sites and mound sites of England. Salisbury Plain, Stonehenge, this is where this exists. And this goes back a lot older than people realize. As I think Andrew mentioned earlier, there's evidence now going back to 10,000 years of occupation and building at this particular site. But this is an electrical resistivity map of the area, and this was actually used in archaeology originally, but you can work out from this where the electrical current has actually moved through the site, and the white areas here, okay, I've just turned something off. It's on again, thank God. Okay. There's the energy. And so here, this is the entrance here. This is the northeast entrance. And this is, you can see this white area. This is actually where the ground currents have moved in to the site, and they've hit the back wall here. I call it a wall for good reason. It's actually the henge. It's actually the ditch or the moat around the outside of Stonehenge. You get this at many other megalithic sites. And so what it does, these telluric currents only go about 3 feet below the surface of the ground, and they rest on top of the surface. So if you dig a ditch more than 2 or 3 feet below the ground, below ground level, you actually get, the energy will hit it like a wall and move through the path of least resistance. Okay, someone's changing my slides. And so this is a very interesting example of what we're seeing, just at a classic site like, so ignore this is just a pathway that you walk around. But this is just an example of how they would manipulate the energies and direct it into sites, then utilize it for various purposes that we'll see about shortly. Even at Avery, this is a brilliant reconstruction by an author called Nicholas Mann of what it used to look like. Now, each one of these, this circle here, is roughly the same size as Stonehenge. This is how big this place is. In fact, it's so big, they built a village inside it. And this is, the entrance is here, and the same principles are at work, where the energies would move in through these different avenues and then be controlled inside. And interestingly, some tests were done on the different stones there, and they found all the ones around the outer edge and these ones here. Now, each stone here has its own magnetic orientation, and somehow they worked out what each stone's orientation was magnetically and aligned them to one another. So you would actually get this effect of the energy being pushed around the site into a circular fashion in all these different aspects. And it wasn't just in the main circle we're talking about here, because these had 2 very long avenues going along here to what's now a destroyed stone circle, now called the sanctuary. and another one here, which has only got 2 stones left in this one, and Silbury Hill, which is a whole energy generator in its own right. But also what you've got here, which we're going to talk a bit more about later, is the Michael and Mary energy lines sweeping through this site. Combined with the telluric energies and the underground water, this was a very powerful place. And also, in the area, there's lots of sacred springs, and this is something that John Michel pointed out when he was doing his research all over England, specifically in the Land's End region of Cornwall. And many of the stones mark the avenues of where water goes under the ground. And this itself creates electric charge, especially when you're in the area and the energy gets pushed through these very small gaps, and it creates this electric charge. And this has been found evidenced all around the world at various different sites. This just shows you where the Michael energies and the Mary energies meet and go through Avery here. We'll look in more detail at that later, but I just wanted to show you that for now. We find very similar things happening on the other side of the world at Tiwanaku in Bolivia. This is an old photograph of the main Kalasaya temple, which had 99 stones like this around its perimeter. Interestingly, there were 99 stones in the main stone circle at Avery as well. But here, this is a very energetic site. People don't realize this, but up on the Akapana pyramid here, this is the top part of it. In the center here was once a water pool, which they used to have sluice gates and water traveling down around the whole site. And not only that, it's flanked by 2 fault lines. There's also a major negative magnetic anomaly right here in the center. And you take your compass up there and it absolutely goes crazy, but they don't let you in this part now, so you can't really do anything there. But we actually went there with, when we were filming the Pumapunku show program for Ancient Aliens, and we got some results just using a basic magnetometer. Okay, so I'm just going to show you this small clip of me at Pumapunku just describing some of the things that were actually going on at the site. So just behind me you can see one of the water channels. Now, this would have had water coming down at very fast speed. You can see the way the rocks on top of it are actually kind of compressing it so it keep the trapped charged particles in there. It's also got the keystone cuts. Now you wouldn't really need keystone cuts unless, because the stones would have stayed together, I'm sure, if they were built correctly. So I think they were used definitely for energy, transference of energy through the copper or bronze or the orichalcum or whatever they used. And this is a fine example of what John Burke talks about in his book, Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty, where he's very convincing argument that this whole site, including the Akapana pyramid, but also here at Pumapunku, was, a generator for energy to create and charge up seeds, to increase fertility of the crops. But with these channels, they often go down right into the fields around them, which is equally fascinating, suggesting the charged water was being used. You can see evidence of where water has moved down these channels, which does give good evidence that indeed they were used for that purpose. What's also interesting here is the fact that we have the andesite blocks right next to the red sandstone, the magnetic red sandstone, then andesite again. So we have alternative stone, different types of stone, which could have again created an energetic effect throughout the whole system here at Pumapunku. Okay, so that's basically just a quick outline of what's happening at Pumapunku. And the thing is, they're actually excavating this site now. And even at Tiwanaku, they found another pyramid under the ground at Tiwanaku, which is currently being excavated. We're going to be going back there this time next year on a tour. We do one every year with Brian Forrester. And there's actually him, you can see him standing there, who filmed this, these aerial shots of Pumapunku. And some of the stones there are incredibly large. Some, they say, around 200 tons. The original estimates were even bigger than that, but they've been transported from literally the mountains beyond those ones in the far distance. So it's an incredible place, but it shows the same technology and the same, fertility technologies. They were working with charging up seeds with this energy. And this has also been noted again in New York State. This is another very interesting site in North Salem, Dolman, which just shouldn't be there. I mean, what's that doing there? Crikey! I mean, someone just brought that over from England or something. But this is incredible, because this is between 60 and 90-ton granite boulder resting on 5 or 6, originally 6 quartzite blocks, which creates a very powerful piezoelectric effect. Here's just me wandering about in another little video with the sound down. It just shows you the size of it, just looking at some of the details here. But what we found, what John Burke found, was this, is that it's sitting on a magnetic anomaly, a negative magnetic anomaly. It's on a fault line, a whole stretch of it is literally on that ridge there. And when we were there, we actually found seeds within it. Someone had placed seeds within it. They were doing the tests that John Burke was doing. But when they went and planted these seeds, they got incredible results. And they actually found that you get sometimes a 300% increase in yield if you placed your seeds at these sites and then went to grow them. You get a much better yield. So these sites were used as a fertility technology to enhance agriculture, to increase the food supply, but the exact same energy affects your consciousness. That's what people didn't realize until John Burke did his work and found this out. It's the exact same type of energy, and it triggers the pineal gland. You have various effects. A lot of people believe these are vision quest sites, and so on and so forth. And here's some further images that just show you. These are some orbs that were photographed by John Burke when he was doing his research. This is the one from the nearby chamber. This was actually on top of the Lost World Pyramid, the oldest, possibly Olmec pyramid at Tikal. And this just shows you his book cover here. But this is a very important piece of research done by this genius, in my opinion, who has passed away, unfortunately. But he was one of the most important people in the study of Earth mysteries and brought science into the ancient art of geomancy and kind of gave it some clout. Because also you find dolmens everywhere. They're literally all over the world. Every country you can virtually find an example of a dolmen. I found them in Colombia. There's 19,000 dolmens in Korea, which really shocked me when I found that out. My buddy went there, and he didn't see all of them. He saw some of them, and he got so excited. He called me. I hadn't spoken to him for 2 years, a guy called Charlie Sturton, and just called me on Skype and said, "Hugh, there's 19,000 dolmens in Korea." And I went, wow. And then he put the phone down, and that was it. And he was so blown away by what he'd discovered. This just shows you some of the examples of the different qualities of the crops. These ones on the bottom here were from the Lost World Pyramid in Tikal, and the ones on the top left there were placed in the chamber we looked at earlier. And you can see the increase from the standard controls against the samples that were placed actually in the chamber itself. Iroquois blue flint corn, an ancient type of corn. And it also grew about twice as fast. It grew larger, which is particularly interesting when we're looking into the whole thing about giants, that this energy has actually increased the size of living tissue in plants and in animals and humans. I couldn't believe it when I found this. This is from 1903. This is from the Anderson Intelligencer, July the 16th, 1903, with the headline that says "grew in spite of age," and they found an 8.5-foot tall giant skeleton 60 feet below a mound, and he had a jar with him with one piece of corn in it, a corn seed in it. So when they thought, okay, this is interesting, so what they literally could have been there hundreds, if not thousands of years. And when they planted this piece of corn, it was an incredibly good yielder, better than the local corn in the area. So this giant, 8.5-foot tall giant, knew the secrets of the ancients, and this was one clue that it was these guys who were doing it. It may also explain how they lifted that 90-ton block into place. But that's just not it. There's lots of other examples of this kind of energy work, energy tests being done around the world. This is some work done by some Russian researchers, I think about 6 or 7 years ago. And they built these fiberglass pyramids, and you can see the list on the left there of some of the results that came from it. And this was actually based on the golden ratio. It's obviously, so is the Great Pyramid, so are other pyramids around the world. They are based on the golden ratio. So as long as you base it upon certain geometric principles, the pyramids can do this. And you can pretty much build them in anywhere, and it will still create an effect. And we got the same results from this as you get from the dolmens, you get from the mounds, and you get from other sites around the world. This is just a quote from the brilliant Paul Devereaux. I just would like to read this to you because this was done back in the late 80s from his book Places of Power. The ancient sites of power were sometimes found and sometimes deliberately constructed to mimic or enhance what could be found in nature. In either case, the forces of the natural world were used, and they were used for a variety of purposes, such as the promotion of fertility and for healing. But the overriding purpose was the need to have gateways through which contact with spirit could be achieved. In the ancient world, there were certain people who knew how to work with the physical world in order to create access to the spiritual. So this is the different aspects of the same kind of energy we're dealing with here. This is a very interesting quote from an old Apache chief, and I found this I was actually researching the Giants when I stumbled across this. It's from the book, a book by Vine Deloria Jr. And this is very interesting. I'll just read this to you as well. I find this fascinating. Some say the earth talks to them. They get their ceremony from that. Some say the wind has life. Some say the mountains, like San Andreas, have life. Anyone who gets power from it says the mountain talks to me. The old people tell stories that show that all things have life: trees, rocks, wind, mountains. Some believe that there is a cliff where the mountain people stay, and they often open the cliffs and talk to them. So we do find these traditions where the earth is alive, these different aspects are alive. But I guarantee they were at places where this magnetism, these telluric currents, and these energies were affecting their consciousness, and they were able to then gain access to these other realms. And even in the modern version of geomancy, we find there are very odd grids called the Hartman and Curry grids all around the world. These are roughly the size you're going to get with these grids. This is my buddy Sean Kerwin. I just want to big him up. He's a brilliant geomancer, and if you're ever in England, he's the man to go to if you want your house sorted out. But geomancers have discovered lots of networks of energy. These are just two of them. The first was discovered by Dr. Ernst Hartmann in the 1960s. It's a square grid, 5'5" apart. And another version is the Curry grid, which is a slight angle variation. But what they found is that you get extreme problems occurring if you build your house in the wrong way or at the wrong place, and you sleep in a bed, and you can actually get incredibly sick. This is just one quote here from the work of Dr. David Cowan. It's actually a review of his work by an expert in this, but Cowan's work in these areas of geopathic stress is of the utmost importance, as exposure to black energy can cause ME, MS, necrotizing fasciitis, motor neurone disease, Alzheimer's, epilepsy, and so on and so forth, and even demonic possession. So the problem is, what we're finding here is that people just aren't building the way they used to. Even in China today, the Feng Shui practitioners work with architects, they work with landscape designers to enable the energy, the dragon lines, to flow through the landscape, flow properly, and to not build up into negative black spots, where often today in the Western world we don't care about that kind of thing. It's all about business and building where's convenient and what's useful, but it's not about where the energies flow. So now people get very, very sick because of these simple problems that can be dealt with if you know how. So call your local geomancer, he'll sort you out. And I mean, my buddy Sean Kerwin and many others, like Hamish Miller was a geomancer, they can turn up at your house and they can fix it. They can rearrange the underground waters, they can redirect energies, and they can move things around in the house, and you have to leave your windows open for the energy to flow through and things like this, and you can get results, and you can actually cure your illnesses because of that. So there's more to it than meets the eye here. This is an interesting work. This French researcher, I've completely forgotten his name, but he works with me and Sean when he comes over to England. He found the dolmens, specifically dolmens, and certain other megalithic sites, actually deflect the Hartman and Curry grids, the ones that can cause problems. And you can see an image on the left here, which kind of shows the way they move, sort of push it around. But strangely, the dolmens allow everything else in. The earth energy currents, the yin-yang earth energy currents, the telluric currents, the underground water, etc., etc. But for some reason, so there's now evidence that these were deliberately designed for that purpose, to create a neutral space where, again, you could place these seeds and the right energies could charge them up. And you could sit and meditate there and get the correct influence on your consciousness. So, sorry? Well, you got the dolmen here, yeah, and then this, you can see the way it pushes the lines away from it. You can't see it so well in this one. But there's other aspects to this. There's one aspect which absolutely intrigues me, is the study of cymatics. Now, this is a very odd thing, because not only do you get these energies around the world, you get noises, like a symphony of noise. And it does have relevance to the study of grids and earth energies. This is the work of Hans Jenny, and it basically is about sound affecting matter and creating geometry in matter. And this symphony of noise on the earth, although mostly beyond our scope of hearing, could be a symphony that generates energetic geometries on our planet, because you can see the results they get with this are very geometric. The earth gives off a relentless hum of countless notes imperceptible to the human ear. Seismometers can detect the Earth's hum. There's one which is a colossal, mysterious ring-like oscillation that goes across the entire planet that has been compared to the Om sound of Hindu creationism. There's more recent studies have been found, this is just from earlier this year, where hums have been recorded. No one knows where they came from. Actually drove one guy to suicide. It did his head in so much because he could not get rid of it. This was actually from April this year. So this is the one they're talking about. They're called the Bristol hum. And they were asking, have you heard the hum? 800 people said they could hear it. And it created headaches and nosebleeds. And it's like a diesel car idling in the distance, as it was described. But there's more to this than meets the eye, because you've also got the Schumann resonance. You've also got various other aspects, such as even the aurora, the northern lights, emit shrieks and whistles into space, known as auroral kilometric radiation, when charged particles from the solar wind hit the Earth's magnetic field. Also, we have, if our ears were more like antennas, I'm sure one or two of you have probably got those, we would hear lightning strikes emit a broadband pulse of radio waves. They're called spherics, tweaks, and whistlers, and this is science, that travel around the world by bouncing back and forth between the surface and the ionosphere, striking somewhere on the planet roughly 100 times per second. Interestingly, they move along magnetic flow lines, which is very interesting, and are strongest at dusk and dawn, like we find with the telluric currents. The connection with Earth energy is very, very important. But combined with earthquakes, volcanoes, moving water, high force winds, could this symphony somehow organize the energies of the Earth into a geometric form, like we see with the study of cymatics? Quite possibly. So these are the 5 Platonic solids. These are shapes that could have been influenced by sound when they were first derived. But what's interesting here is the fact that we find examples that are much older than Plato. These were found in northern Scotland, going back at least 4,000 to 5,000 years. But even Plato himself, who was around, 300 to 500 BC or so forth, he quoted and he wrote, the real Earth, viewed from above, resembles a ball made out of 12 pieces of leather, variegated and marked out in different colors. So he was explaining that the Earth itself had this shape with these 12 sides, which would resemble a dodecahedron, this shape here. So now we're going to get into the grid. I think this is where it gets geometrical. This is the first real evidence of grids in modern times. This is from 1972, the work of Ivan T. Sanderson. You may know his work. He's a brilliant author. And he came up with this idea of vial vortices, or the 12 devil's graveyards around the world. The Bermuda Triangle is one of them, just so you know what we're talking about here. Here we have the Bermuda Triangle. Hawaii, you've got the Devil's Triangle off the coast of Japan, even Easter Island, the South Atlantic anomaly, which is intriguing, and various other sites. But what he realized was, he did some statistical work into strange disappearances, anomalies, time dilations, instrument malfunctions, and strange phenomena, UFO sightings as well. I found that there was 12 areas around the planet where these most occurred in. You have these 10 that go along the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, but also the North and the South Pole. And what he realized was, quickly, that this forms the vertices or points of an icosahedron, which is one of the other Platonic solids. And you can see it here in 3D, which we did for the book. And this is 20 triangular faces around the planet. This is one of the classic 5 Platonic solids. We also have the dodecahedron being formed within the Earth. And this is the quote from Plato here. This is one of the stone spheres discovered in Scotland, representing a dodecahedron. But it was noted by Russian researchers and others that if you emphasize these lines of the dodecahedron, it almost perfectly matches the mid-Atlantic ridge, which is could be of very, very much importance to understanding this whole study. Getting onto the subject of crystals again, this is the work of 3 brilliant Russian researchers. These are their names. I'm not going to read them out. And they did some work at roughly the same time as Ivan Sanderson. And they published a paper in 1973 in a scientific journal, and were absolutely convinced that there was a grid around the planet. And they believed, it may not sound odd to you, but this is odd because it was published in a scientific journal in Russia, that they believed over millions of years ago, the Earth was a great crystal. And over time, the Earth and the water and the mass of the planet that we know today formed around it from debris from space and so forth, and eventually formed the Earth. And the energetic principles of that original crystal are still in the Earth and can still be felt on the surface today. And this is why these geometries occur on the surface as we see them. And this is the kind of the system that they came up with. They basically, the article was called, Is the Earth a Large Crystal? In the Chemistry and Life Science Journal. And it matched closely with what Ivan Sanderson was talking about previously. And it just shows you a different version of it. It looks more like a net around the planet, this one. But what they found is that it matched many of the Earth's seismic fracture zones and ocean ridges, and also outlined worldwide atmospheric highs and lows, the paths of migratory animals, gravitational anomalies, and the site of many ancient temples. And this is just a few of the examples of what we find on this version of the grid. And they obviously based it on the North and South Pole and used the mid-Atlantic ridge to fix the dodecahedron, which is going down here around the planet, and came up with this dodecahedron grid. And this is just a version of it which I put together in Google Earth. But there's more. Bruce Cathy in 1952. Any of you know about Bruce Cathy? Some of you? One. Excellent. Okay. In 1952, he was basically an airline pilot in New Zealand, but in 1952 he experienced a UFO sighting that dramatically changed his life. And he realized, he was very smart. He knew about navigation and plotting and GPS and things like this, and got a load of data together from other airline pilots and reliable sources, and realized that all the sightings of UFOs in New Zealand that he could find seemed to, if you placed them onto the map and drew lines, they seemed to create this perfect kind of square grid over the entire country. He got very excited by this, and he grabbed a ball from his football or soccer ball from, I think, his son's playroom, and drew all these lines over it, and realized he had found a grid that could actually go over the entire planet. And this was the one based on this originally. And the other thing he noted was that all the UFOs only move north and south along these particular lines. None were noted off these particular grid lines. And so it was very, very strange. But then he noticed that a researcher in France called Aimé Michel found exactly the same thing over that country as well, on the other side of the world. And so he realized there was something very important going on here. But what is interesting to me is that it was a mixture of the cube and the octahedron, which are 2 of the other Platonic solids. This is what it kind of looks like. The yellow is the octahedron here. And you can kind of see the way suddenly all things start to link up and form into this grid. But it was the final analysis that everyone has seen images of before. You've probably all seen this. Was put together by William Becker and Beth Hagens, who developed this concept based on Buckminster Fuller's work, actually. And they were aware of the Russians' work and Ivan Sanderson's work as well. And they combined, this basically contains the Russians' research, but they kind of worked on it a bit more closely using structural geometry and came up with a slight variation of the icosahedron. It's actually the dual of the icosahedron Archimedean solid, and it's called a rhombic triacontahedron. So I'm going to test you on that later. Rhombic triacontahedron, don't forget that, it's very important to something or other. And it has 30 diamond-shaped faces and combines as the combined points or vertices of the icosa and dodecahedron. It's got 15 great circles that kind of hoop around the planet. And it's got basically, if you combine all the different systems together, you get 4,862 points on the surface. So it gets a bit much after a while when you're trying to research this. But about 3,300 ancient sites fall onto these grid lines. There's some weird little anomalies here. You can see, like here, the Gulf of Carpentaria up in Australia. This is a grid point, and you can see the way the landmass forms around this particular point. You get the same thing here, South America. You've got the Bermuda Triangle there. You've got the Devil's Triangle there. Timbuktu, various other places, Hawaii, Easter Island, and so on and so forth. You get northern Scotland. There's some very interesting sites up there like Orkneys and Callanish and so forth. This just shows you one of the faces over the Americas, mainly North America. And you can just see it kind of centers around, this is like one of the faces here. You can see the way it centers around the Bermuda Triangle. This is a rhombic triacontahedron. It's basically a puffed out icosahedron if you want to get untechnical about it. And this just shows you one of the early maps by Becker-Hagens and William Becker over Europe. You see this very neat and tidy way it kind of forms around Britain. Now this line here is particularly interesting because this is the St. Michael line. And this line here is the Apollo-Athena line, which we're going to look at briefly shortly. This just shows you what it looks like on Google Earth if you combine all the different Platonic solids and geometries together into the unified vector geometry system, as they called it. So there's a lot going on there. Obviously, it's all covered in the tiny book I've got outside. And I'm working on a much larger book about this because a lot more research has come forth since then. But this just shows you a close-up of England here. So I'm from this area here. I live down here now. And this just shows you a close-up of North America. I'm just showing you pretty pictures for a little while, and then we'll get into some stuff. But look, you can just see where the lines move around. This area here is very interesting. It's like in the Sonora Desert. Up here as well, yeah, so on and so forth. I'm sure you can find things in there that I can't see. And this is the fundamental grid we're looking at here, just to confuse your mind a little bit more. So it gets a bit confusing, but there's a really cool program. If you're into this, if you're a nerd, if you're like me basically, you can get on Google Earth and you can download a grid program called the UVG Grid by William Becker and Beth Hagens. And you can overlay it on your own version of Google Earth, and you can play around with it. You can follow the lines. You can see if your house is on it. See if any UFOs are moving along it and things like this. But yeah, you can do it yourself, and it's a very useful tool. We used another program we actually designed ourselves. John Martineau put it together. He's one of my editors, publishers, and we used a different program so we can move the grid around and fix it in different places. But it's not just on Earth we're dealing with here when we're talking about these kind of geometries. All across our solar system we find evidence of geometrical forms, cymatic effects possibly, and other things occurring on other planets. This is Mars. And it's surprising because if you look, this is the work actually, I think of, I'm not sure if it was Drunvalo or David Wilcock, but if you put tetrahedron inside a sphere, we put two tetrahedrons, one upside down, it's called the star tetrahedron, or Merkaba, some people call it, and the points touch the surface at 19.5, or correctly 19.47 degrees. And this area here It's exactly where Hawaii sits on the surface of the Earth. And hence, that's the biggest volcano complex on the planet. Likewise, we have the same thing on Mars. We have the Olympus Mons volcano system, not actually the right picture here, but actually sits at 19.47 degrees on Mars. And there are other examples that link with 19.5 degrees. There's increased solar flare activity on the sun, and dark bands of clouds around Saturn sit at 19.5 degrees. Interestingly, it was thought that Jupiter, actually the red spot on Jupiter was at 19.5 degrees, but it's not, it's at 22.5 degrees. And that's interesting in itself, because that's a quarter of a quadrant distance. It's a quarter of a quarter of the planet, which is in its own right a very interesting position on the planet. There's also a great dark spot on Neptune. There's thin white cloud bands circling the planet. And these were witnessed in 1994. And then in April 1995, they'd switched to the north of the equator at the same latitude. So lots of weird stuff is going on in our solar system, suggesting that these geometries and these energies and these shapes are part of nature. They're part of universal law, and they exist everywhere. This is an example, Miranda, of Uranus's moon. We find pentagonal and hexagonal geometries forming on the surface of the planet, as well as triangles. This is weird. This is very weird. This is the North Pole of Saturn, and this is a massive hexagon, which is twice the width of the Earth, which was discovered in 1981 by NASA, and it's like a cymatic hexagon, and it's incredible. I mean, and how it maintains itself, this just shows you the way the cloud bands move around it, and this actually shows you a graphic of it moving. And you can actually see, this was photographed by NASA, and there's some very interesting little things here, because not only have you got this is like 50 times bigger than any storm that's ever happened on Earth, is permanently happening on the North Pole of Saturn. And it creates a hexagonal shape. But then you get these storms happening within it, kind of being dragged around by this. You see these? So it's an incredible system, and it's incredibly powerful. And the fact that this is going on, and no one's really commenting on it, is very intriguing, to say the least. Also on Iapetus, this is Saturn's moon. We have this very odd ridge. It's like a wall. It's like about 10 or 12 miles tall. It's about the same width. And it goes all around the center, the exact equator of the moon. No one knows how it got there, who did it, or why it's there. So we have these very large rocks in space with these very strange geometries, but we get very small ones too here on Earth, like I've already mentioned, which is these stone spheres that were discovered in northern Scotland. These are some are on display at the Ashmolean Museum. They're at least 1,000 years before Plato, probably 2,000 or 3,000 years in all honesty. And they were found near megalithic structures in Scotland. These are some examples here. These are the 5 Platonic solids. This one's the grid of some sort, and you get brilliant, beautiful. This is actually an iron one discovered in France, which is Roman, but it proves that this understanding was known about through different cultures over different epochs. These are the ones on display. This is a credit to Martin Morrison, who gave me these photos. These are the Hunterian, I spelled it wrong, Hunterian Museum in Glasgow. But you can see the beautiful geometries here. And these are roughly the size of a tennis ball. Like, you can hold them in your hand. They don't let you hold them in your hand, but they are that size. But I think they were used for various purposes. The weirdest thing is they weren't found directly at megalithic sites. They were found in the fields near megalithic sites where they were growing crops. So I believe they used these as kind of fertility amulets, and they believe the geometry created this kind of energy, which was then planted. Many of these are crystalline. But you find all these different shapes and sizes. These are on display at the British Museum. These are the only ones on display at the British Museum. They have many more, apparently. But you also find spherical ones found in a place called Loughcrew in Ireland, which is an ancient megalithic temple site in the Boyne Valley. And these are energetic. One is iron ore, it's like lodestone. The other one is granite. So one is crystalline and one is iron. So they have magnetic and electrical properties within these spheres found at other sites, this time in Ireland. And so it suggested that these like the geometric spheres, were used for this purpose as well. You also find the spirals often on these spheres, as well as in many other places. To me, this is one of the signatures of the gods, possibly the giants, that they were working with these spirals. It was like their kind of secret signature. But strangely, this also represents how telluric energies congregate within chambers and at ancient sacred sites. This just shows you some of the places where they've been found. Shows you a close-up of one of the most beautiful. It's called the Towie ball. Beautiful, beautiful carving on solid black granite. More strangely, I actually found one of these in a museum in Bolivia. This one here. It's actually from a site, I'm not sure which site it is, they don't have the details, but it was found around Lake Titicaca. And this just shows you another angle on it. And this is virtually exactly the same size. It shows the same geometry. And I'm just going to just show you a little bit of film footage just so you can see, you know, what it actually looks like. But I couldn't believe it when I found this there, because I've been doing research on these stone spheres for a long time. And then this turned up. I couldn't believe it. And so potentially the Scots made their way over to South America. Is that possible? It could be possible, because what we've found is that along the Amazon and the opening of the Amazon, it can go all the way in, and you can get very close to Lake Titicaca. And all along the area, there's stone circles, there's geometric earthworks, and they're all based on the same principles as the stone circles in Scotland and Britain. And also, this was found at Tiwanaku as well, which could prove that the Scots were in Tiwanaku. Very happy chappies. Anyway. But what's most interesting is that the spheres, the combination of all the different Scottish spheres, were analysed by a master geometer called Keith Critchlow. Spoken at a conference once back in 2007. He's a genius. I do recommend you look into his work. A book called Time Stands Still is one of the best pieces of work on ancient geometry at ancient sites around the planet. But he analysed all these stone spheres, put them all together into one complete system, and he came up with this. Now, what intrigued me the most is that it is identical to the Earth grid. Absolutely identical when you analyse it and place them together. This is a complicated version of the grid, but it's the same systems. So what these spheres were used for could potentially have been, they could have been used to kind of work out the geometries of the Earth and other things. Even weirder, if we look into the where the North Pole used to be on the planet, it didn't used to be where it is now. It actually used to be in Hudson Bay area up here. So what we did was, it's like 30 degrees off where it is now. So myself and John Martin and I worked on this and using the World Grid program that John designed. And we found that if you shift the entire grid and place the North Pole where it used to be, all the, everything shifts slightly. It's like, so, and it's how it moved, we don't know whether it's just magnetic movement or if it's actually Earth crustal displacement or it's something else, if a cataclysm did. I'm not going to get into that now. But suddenly, all these other sites suddenly fit onto the grid. These very, very ancient sites, potentially, especially Göbekli Tepe. Kalanish now is a lot older than people thought. Baalbek could be extremely old. Nabta Playa, the small stone circle, which is at least 6,000 to 7,000 years old. And even Easter Island and sites in Mexico could be much older. So once you shift the grid to the old North Pole, some very ancient sites fit into place, which is, to me, is utterly mind-blowing. And we thought, well, there must be something in this. Anyway, moving on. The next section, we're going to talk briefly, or actually for quite a long time, about some ley lines and alignments around the planet. Because the grid is one thing. It could be many things. It could be a naturally formed energetic structure we find due to the symphony of noise that comes in from the cosmos and comes up from the Earth. It could be just the natural principles at play. It could be designed partly. It could be worked on by ancient humans, and sites were placed to manipulate and harness and sort of mark out the grid. But let's come closer into Earth and look at some smaller alignments. Let's start in Malta. This is a very interesting Mediterranean island that has sites on the sister island called Gozo that go back at least 6,000 or 7,000 years. Also, they found many elongated skulls on the island in a place called the Hypogeum, which is like a huge underground temple. I spent a couple of months there earlier this year. Sort of lived there for 2 months, and these are just some of the spirals. Again, you find them in Malta as well as Britain. This is my buddy, he's an archaeoastronomer called Stuart Mason. Up in Gozo, there's a very interesting fallen dolmen called Sansuna dolmen. Now, Sansuna was the ancient goddess of the islands, and she was a giant. And she was said to have mated with a human male and given birth to a giant son, who she then carried on her back and strided across the landscape and created these megalithic sites. And she would carry the rocks on her back in a sheet, and then as she stumbled, she would drop them and megalithic sites would be formed. This is the kind of legend of the island. This is Sansuna Dolmen. This is said to be one of the stones she dropped. About a mile away, we have Gigantia Temple, which means like Temple of the Giants. And what I found was, if you draw a line between them, you get this very interesting connection here. You got the two sites up here. You got the Sansuna Dolmen and you got Gigantia, very close to each other. But if you extend exactly through the center of both these sites and continue, it hits this other temple site here called Bugiba. And this is actually within the grounds of a hotel now. So if you go to Malta, you're more likely you'll stay at this hotel. And this again has connections with the legend of Sansuna. So she was striding in a dead straight line and forming these sites through different islands, through Camino, and then onto this is the mainland of Malta here. So this is one of many that you can discover yourselves if you start looking into it. But I find using the old legends, using the old stories, you find little clues. And this is how you can work with these. They're not just random alignments. There's actually a story associated with these alignments. That just shows you the temple close up. Also at Gigantia, the Temple of the Giants, on the left here, this is like a thin pillar with a serpent, relief carving of a serpent going all the way down it. It's almost identical to the ones we find at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which absolutely fascinated me because there's only a few thousand years difference, and it's not a huge distance. You could imagine they traveled around this part of the world, and there could certainly be connections there. Also, we have what appears to be T-shaped pillars with holes in, much like you find at Göbekli Tepe, as well as the relief carvings we saw in the previous slide. But Göbekli Tepe, I'm not going to talk about it too much. Andrew's dealing with all that. He's got the main research on that. But there's one thing I spotted, which is interesting. It may be a coincidence, but last year I was writing this article for Graham Hancock's website about connections around the world. And if you draw a line between Göbekli Tepe, the dead center of enclosure D, which is, I think is the main enclosure there, and you draw a line and join it up with the Coricancha in Cuzco, Peru. Both of these sites are navel sites. They're like belly button sites. They both mean the navel of the world, or belly hill, or something to do with the navel, the center of the world, the center of their local world at least. And they both translate to roughly the same thing. And I couldn't believe it when this number popped out. Now, I don't know if you're into numbers too much, but 7928 was really intriguing because that is the Earth's diameter at the circumference. That is scientifically proven. That is the exact diameter of the Earth at the circumference, 7928 miles. If it was 8 miles shorter, it would be even better, because then we get the 7920, which is an ancient canonical number used by ancient geometries and people into ancient metrology, builders of temples. And this was a very important number because it was able to be divided and multiplied. And this is something they relied on over and over again in the ancient world, to be able to have consistent number systems. Something I'm very into. To me, it's like a language. The language of numbers in space and geometry is the secret language of the ancients. And I think once we start understanding that, we'll find more and more information coming forth from these ancient temples. So 8 times 9 times 10 times 11 equals that. Very convenient if you're trying to work with these canonical numbers. So it could be a coincidence, or it could be a connection, because I'm utterly convinced. And in another lecture I do, not at this conference, unfortunately, there was a lot of comparisons to be made between Göbekli Tepe and sites in Peru and Bolivia. GPS BC. This is fascinating, weird subject. I thought I'd just nail it into 5 letters there. And basically what we're looking at here is the idea that they understood. They surveyed the planet, they understood where they were on the planet, and in the sites themselves, they encoded where they were. So they encode, so it's very strange story. It's just, I'm going to give you a few weird examples that I spotted when I was just doing some research for the book. If you draw a line between Giza, the main pyramid at Giza, and Newgrange in Ireland, which is the sort of major ceremonial megalithic site, it's 1/10 of the planetary circumference, exactly. Literally exactly. If you, the center of that to the center of the Great Pyramid, which is this one, I believe, that if you continue that around, that's 1/10 of the circumference at that angle around the planet. Coincidence? Could be. And then if we have this site here in Ohio called the Newark Earthworks, and this is the orientation I find very interesting of sites as well, because a lot of it's to do with astronomy, obviously, but some of it I think is to do with geodesy or geodesy, which is the spatial arrangement of sites around the planet. If you continue this line, for 6,000 miles, you hit the Giza Pyramid, exactly in the center of it. You can see it here. Could be a coincidence. But if you analyze the geometry of the Newark earthworks, you find that the faces of the Great Pyramid fit within it and can be built within the actual underlying geometry of this site. This is something that Ross Hamilton, brilliant researcher, who we call the godfather of giantology, who we'll talk more about tomorrow, but he came up with this. And to me, it's a very important discovery, connecting different sites around the planet. This just shows you the geometric form, the octagonal form of the Newark earthworks in Ohio. But what you have to do really is you have to find the center. You have to find the navel, the belly button, the center of the different cultures around the world. In England, we have the Isle of Man. There are 2 main centers in England, not just the Isle of Man. There's also Meridian in Warwickshire, which is the center of England. Slight variation. But we find examples all across England when you're looking for the sacred center of the land. And this is something that was known about, sorry about this, just getting my slides mixed up. So this was known about all across the world, basically, and it was like the kind of moot or the ting site of the ancients. This is a European tradition more than North American or anything. And you would always locate the exact center of your landmass, and that there is where you would place your sacred stone or your sacred mound and give out laws to the rest of your culture. But it was also to do with geomancy and control, and kind of like having, you know, your particular area you would be able to control from there. So the dead center of Britain, interestingly, is the Isle of Man. There's a moot or ting mound at the center of the Isle of Man that marks that spot. So this was known about, at least in the British Isles. Obviously, we find that, you know, what is the center of the world? We know there's centers of different cultures around the world. But when you're working with grids, when you're working with this GPS BC system, you have to have a prime meridian. You have to have a north-south line going from the North Pole to the South Pole to get results and to work from. Now, obviously, it goes through Greenwich, which I don't think is the right spot for it. It should be going through the Great Pyramid at Giza, because back in the 1700s, Napoleon surveyors, of all people, actually surveyed the whole area and realized that it just made sense that should be the center of Egypt and it should be the center of the world. And there's some examples here I just want to show you. If you have that as the prime meridian, this is actually the work of Graham Hancock, who's on tonight. This is from his book Heaven's Mirror, and it's a very interesting piece, actually, because what he found is that if you have the prime meridian as the central line and all sides go from it, left and right, basically the longitudes, you find harmonic distances between major temple sites around the world. And these are just some examples here. For example, Angkor here is this distance from here, Pompeii. Different sites, and we'll look at some examples are here on the left-hand side. So the harmonic longitudes from Giza, we find Baalbek is 5 degrees, Angkor Wat 72, which is a harmonic number, Chavin, Peru 108, and so on and so forth. And these are the alignment of sites from one to the other, nothing to do with Giza. Oops-a-daisy. So I just want to let you focus on that for a moment while I have my glass of water. Done? There's also evidence, you've probably seen this before, that the Great Pyramid was designed and built to represent the Earth. The height and perimeter of the Great Pyramid multiplied by 43,200 yields a very close size of the Earth. It's pretty incredible. And this is also a canonical number. So you can, 26 times 33 times 52 equals 43,200. And it's also, the base length of the Great Pyramid is also precisely 1/8 of a minute of degree of the Earth's polar circumference. So you find these anomalies constantly, and you realize that these sites hid or encoded this knowledge. This is something I spotted when I was doing some research for some articles about quarries and about the significance of megalithic quarries as the birthplace of the temple. And Giza pyramid to the unfinished obelisk, which I think is deliberately left there, is actually 365.4 nautical miles, which is a perfect subdivision of the Earth, a nautical mile. And that's the number of days in a year. So we find that we're finding astronomical numbers linking with geodetic numbers. And this is just one of many articles that I put together for this website called ancientorigins.net. Excuse me one sec. Jumping back to Avery and linking it with Giza, this is a very intriguing story here. What we find here, if we divide, is this getting too much for you? I'm getting a bit kind of numbery here, which is a language not many people like. But interestingly, Giza is very close to 30 degrees above the equator, and you can divide, if you base it upon that, then you can create this around the planet, which is a subdivision. It's pretty much perfect. Here, I find this particularly interesting. This is basically Avery. It's Avery again. Avery is such a weird site. It's all about the number 7. Avery is the number 7, basically. It's very odd. If you draw, if you divide Avery here, if you go from the equator, and you go up towards the North Pole, and you'd measure that distance between the equator and where Avery is exactly, that is 1/7 of the Earth's polar circumference. So that you times that by 7, and you get the exact polar circumference, and this is where Avery sits. If you divide it into a quadrant here, it's 4/7 up from the equator, or 2/7 down from the south, or 3/7 down from the south pole. Luxor is 2/7 up from the equator, which is just an interesting anomaly that we discovered. And we find the same 7s kind of divide the rollright stones, Avery and Stonehenge. Now what's weird about Avery is the fact that its position on the planet, if you divide 360 over 7, you get the exact latitude where Avery sits on the planet, 51.7 number. And so, but how did they know that? How could they do that? How did they work that out? To me, it's just an incredible secret that the ancients were doing it. And this is another thing, this was discovered by John Martineau. And he noticed these weird kind of angles on the main henge that kind of intersect through the stone circles here. This is one corridor, this is another corridor here. And the angle between them is exactly the same as the latitude of where it sits on the planet, 360 over 7, divided by 7. So it just gets weirder and weirder the more you look into it. I go into detail in this in my little Earth Grids book. This just shows you the size of some of the stones in Avery. These are the stones inside the small inner circle of Avery, and they've built an entire village within it. Incredible. This just shows you some of the geometries that were worked out here. It's a very complicated geometry. This is the work of Alexander Thom. And here's this slide again for no apparent reason. And that slide again, but I've inverted it. Okay, I don't know what is going on here. Someone's hacked my PowerPoint. And this is further geometries discovered by a guy called John Smoot in 2009, which took Alexander Thomas to another. I'm not going to go into this here, but it just shows you that there's incredibly complicated geometries and number systems encoded within the site that all kind of fit in with this whole idea that they were working with the number 7. There are further sites and alignments around the world which capture my attention. I'm just going to run through these fairly quickly. But this is an alignment between Stonehenge and the Preseli Bluestone site in Wales, where the stones come from, which is slightly further northwest. So the stones from the quarry come from there, Stonehenge is there. If you continue this line, you go through all these major sites. Delphi, Giza, Mecca. It goes through Ohio Serpent Mound, through Carrowmore and Carrowkeel, Sligo area of Ireland, and so on and so forth. This was discovered by Robin Heath, which I think is a very, very important discovery. Also, we have, if we jump back, stay with Stonehenge, we find that there's some very, very strange anomalies linking Stonehenge with other sites around the British Isles, and we find Pythagorean triangles over the landscape, which shouldn't be there. This is long before Pythagoras was born. But the 3-4-5 triangle is a classic Pythagorean triangle. It's a system that's used throughout the world. Until relatively recently, they thought it was discovered, obviously Pythagoras, but they find that Stonehenge, below, and Bryn Celyn Ddu in Wales are actually form a perfect 3-4-5 triangle across the landscape. We have other examples here. This is the work of Robin Heath. I highly recommend you check out Robin Heath's work. Again, we have the 3-4-5 triangle, but also we have a 5-12-13 triangle linking the Bluestone site, Lundy Island, which is actually shaped like an elbow, and Stonehenge. This just shows you his original illustration of that, just to show you the importance of what he's been discovering here. So what they found was, this is if you actually go within Stonehenge itself, the 4 station stones create a rectangle like this. And if you increase that size by 2,500 times exactly, this occurs in the landscape. So they're kind of encoding things within the sites. If you expand it in a certain way, you find anomalies throughout the landscape. Again, this is what's called the Wessex Asterum, discovered by Peter Knight, as a friend and colleague of mine. And we have Stonehenge here, we have Glastonbury, my hometown, Avery, and other sites that form into this incredible landscape kind of star tetrahedron over Britain, and we keep finding these everywhere. And is it coincidence, or is there something more going on here? It's pretty incredible when you start looking into this. And again, this just shows you that alignment around the world and other examples of great Earth circles. This is an interesting one. This is what we find across Europe. This is the Apollo St. Michael or the Apollo Athena line. We have Skellig Michael in Ireland, St. Michael's Mount in England, Mont Saint-Michel in France, and many other Michael sanctuaries that then turn into Apollo sanctuaries when you come down this way. And you find that Delphi, Dodona, and Delos are all exactly 1 degree of latitude apart from each other, which is like a design. They knew about what they were doing. And these are oracle centers, not only on this major alignment, which also 2 energy lines weaving around it. We also find that they're marking sites on particular latitudes deliberately, as though they're trying to tell us something. And this is one of the subjects which John Michel was really into, and it's the enchantment of the landscape. This really gets me, this really intrigues me, and just it brings a bit of magic back to the land, which has been lost for a very long time. This is just one of the images from the book, and it just shows you lots of ley lines, thingamajigs, lunation triangle, the grid, some alignments up in Scotland. But these ones here, this one here particularly is called the Circle of Perpetual Choirs. And there's a tradition in England that monks used to sit at various sites around the edge. Stonehenge is one, Glastonbury is another, there's other sites around there. And they would perpetually chant forever. They would never stop. And it would create this enchantment across the entire country, which never ended. But it did stop, unfortunately, eventually. And there's another one of these potentially has been discovered in the east side of the country as well. And these are all linked to major megalithic sites that fit on the grid, fit within ley lines and other things. This just shows you a more detailed map, one of the original maps of that. And this is actually some weird stuff that we did ourselves. My friend Sean Kerwin and I, and John Martin, we built a stone circle up at this area here. This is Glastonbury here. It's just north of Glastonbury on the Mendip Hills. And it's a lovely 17 stone circle. The stones were about this big. Took us ages to do it, but we didn't know, we kind of geomanced where we should put it. We weren't sure where it should go. Eventually we chose this particular spot because of the sight lines for astronomy. And then 3 or 4 years later, we built this wood henge at this other site here, just because we were asked to do it. It was like a commission for this festival. And we did that, and we forgot all about it. This actually got demolished, unfortunately. But then me and Sean had this intuition. I'm sure there must be some connection between these sites we've been building. And when we just drew a line from one to the other, it goes through the dead center of Glastonbury Tor. We couldn't believe it. And that was just by pure, it was almost like by pure chance, or was it something else? Was the land talking to us? Was it telling us we should place it here just to create this nice harmony within the landscape? So rather than us enchanting the landscape, we were enchanted by the landscape, and it actually had an effect on us. And it's also said that these great energy currents that weave across southern Britain also have an element of enchantment, which kind of keep working and never stop because energy doesn't stop flowing. This is the Great Michael Line, originally discovered by John Michell, then worked on by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst, where they dowsed these energy lines weaving around it, yin and yang energy lines. It just shows you where they are in relation to the other aspects of Britain. Even in my home area around Cambridge, there's a site called Wanderbury, and crop circles have appeared in this area on the Mary line. And so you find it, you know, it's one of the strange things about the Michael and Mary line in England. It's best, if you want to see crop circles, you hang out near the Michael and Mary energy lines. That's where they occur, always, virtually. This is where it moves through Glastonbury. It goes through Glastonbury Abbey, up the Tor, through various sites. But to me, it really looks like it should be going around, continuing here, and going around the whole planet. Does it really end? Does it really stop here? And you know, is this for real? Can it just sort of stop at these kind of end points here? Well, in fact, if you continue up here, in St. Petersburg, Russia, Hamish Miller picked up the Michael and Mary lines, saw it continuing. He didn't have the time or the energy to go and continue dowsing. But the work of Robert Kuhn from about 20 years ago believed these certainly did go around the world. And this is what's called the Great Rainbow Serpent energy line here. And they're like two great energy hoops that encircle the planets. Have you seen this before? Have people seen this? Yeah, they know about this. Good, yeah. I mean, this really intrigues me. This kind of gets me because I just thought, oh, this can't be real. Are there really two massive energy lines around the planet? And it kind of makes sense because you look at the traditions of the Ouroboros, with the serpent eating its tail. And why not have energy lines? I mean, to me, we know there are telluric currents. We know the magnetic field breaks down into these magnetic and electrical lines around the planet. And I believe that these were just harnessed by the ancients, manipulated, and then placed and sort of like, almost like sort of stuck into the ground by the megaliths. They were like acupuncture needles holding the energy in place. And so you can see, I'll let you gaze at this for a moment, but you can see that this one here is very intriguing. It goes through the Atlantic, goes to Lake Titicaca. And these are also what people call chakra points of the planet. This is one version of that. There are other versions. People say the chakras are other places. I sit on the fence. I'm like, it's all good. But this one, you know, I just find this one interesting because it has these energy currents and it has these connections to other sites. This area here is the most interesting to me. This is the island of the Sun on Lake Titicaca. If you draw a straight line, the Michael line, all the way down through England, and you continue it around the world, precisely, it goes right through the middle of Lake Titicaca. And then I went there in 2007 and actually had a look on the island. In the very north part of the island, you find a dolmen here, almost like a table stone. And this is the path, what I believe is where the Michael energy line goes through. And here it is again. And behind it, this is a famous area which is still revered, and ceremonies still take place up here. The modern Inca come here, and they place offerings in this area here. And this is supposed to be below the belly of the cat. This is the rock of the cat, and the head is down here, and the body kind of goes like this, apparently. And this is supposed to be a famous Puma kind of energy site of the Andes. And this is the birthplace of the Inca world, but also the ancient god Viracocha was said to have emerged from Lake Titicaca onto the north part of the island and created a bunch of stone giants who built the megalithic sites under his guidance. And he moved along what was later became known as the path of Viracocha, starting here in Lake Titicaca, moving slightly southeast briefly, but also all the way up through the Sacred Valley, Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, many other sites to Cajamarca, and up to the coast where he disappeared and promised to return. But Tiwanaku he was said to have built, Pumapunku, and all the major sites in Peru and Bolivia. And this really, really fascinates me because not only did he create a race of giants, which is my kind of favorite subject at the moment, but he was said to have had magical powers. He could summon lightning and thunder. He could levitate stones. He brought all the arts of civilization, such as agriculture, metallurgy, peace between the warring tribes, and lots of different examples of high technology to these particular cultures. And it's said that he actually traveled, this is the other energy line called the plumed serpent energy line, and it's said that he traveled in this direction. And so the same direction as we find with this great energy current that goes all the way up to Mexico, which is another area where we find Quetzalcoatl and these other great gods with extremely similar stories. And so this is just one of the parts of this which absolutely grabbed my attention. But I want to jump back to England. I just want to give you, there's something very strange has been discovered in the landscape here. Around this area here, around Glastonbury, my hometown. This is just one aspect of, this is the Great Michael Line here, this is the Glastonbury area here. This is an interesting site which is very similar to Glastonbury Tor, called Boroughbridge Mump. This is Glastonbury Tor, as you can see, it's huge, a natural hill which has been shaped into like a labyrinth around the edge. But this is also where Aquarius is, this sign here, on the Great Glastonbury Zodiac, which stretches across the entire landscape in this part of Somerset. This is Catherine Maltwood, who first discovered this. And this was marked out by streets, old tracks, rivers, canals, and mounds and earthworks. Actually, the Horn of Capricorn here is an earthwork, a mile-long earthwork called Ponter's Ball. And that is still there, so it still marks exactly where this is. This is how it kind of fits into the landscape, and they connect up into this great diamond. I live right there. I do. I live in a place called Butley Village. It's at the dead center of the Zodiac. Luckily, it's like the sort of Eye of the Storm. It's a pretty quiet place. Just here, right in the center. A place called Butley. And this is Borough Mump again. I just wanted to show you this, because this, according to John Michel, is the most sacred site in Britain. More than anything else, more than Stonehenge, Avery, Glastonbury, anything. He believes Borough Mump is the most sacred site in Britain, but we don't know why he thought that. He didn't tell us. But there are some clues as to why that might be, because we have this, what's called the Girt Dog of Langport. This is part of the Glastonbury Zodiac. The main Zodiac's back up this area here, and this is like the protector dog of the Zodiac. Canis Major, Canis Minor, the various names given to it in astronomy. It's also got legs here that have been not added for some reason. But the nose of the dog is Borough Mump, exactly where the nose is. And there's a tradition that goes back 300 or 400 years, a wassailing tradition, where you have to go once every year to feed the great Girt Dog of Langport, and you throw apples into the river here, the River Farret, where he then feeds on it. And then that protects the land, it protects the mysteries, and it protects the Zodiac. But recently, other things have been discovered that literally overlay the dog. I don't know if you've spotted anything else on here, anyone? If you look here, what's this shape here? It's like the shape of like a horse's head. So about 10 years ago, this was discovered in the landscape, a perfect unicorn. And this is where it connects. This is the dog of Langport. So you've got the dog there, you've got the main zodiac here. This is Leo the lion. You can see the shape of it. And it touches the tail or the hind of the unicorn. And now the third eye of the unicorn is Burrow-Mump. I think this is why John Michel said this was the most sacred point in Britain. He didn't even know about this. He just felt there was something special about it. And also you've got the river here, which is like marks the passage of the horn of the unicorn. So it's a very strange discovery, discovered by my friend David Hatfield, oops-a-daisy, and a couple of his colleagues. That's Burrow-Mump and the dog. But this absolutely fascinates me. It just does not make sense. But there's one little funny little thing, which this is the dog here within the unicorn. And just to prove that this is a potential reality, I used to live here on the tail of the dog, in the heart of the unicorn. This is called Wag Drove. No joke. It's called Wag Drove, and so this is where my buddies lived. The guy who discovered it lives on Wag Drove. He was living in the unicorn when he discovered the unicorn. Very strange, but it gets a little bit weird, because if you actually, last night I actually looked to see if this went anywhere, if this was an important alignment. Was it marking something secret in the landscape? So I drew it out on a map and came up with this. And it continues, that line goes through a bunch of stone circles in Ireland. It goes through the old Hudson Bay North Pole, and it goes through Mount Shasta, which I could not quite believe. And so that's just a discovery I made while I was here, just a quick little play on Google Earth, and you find some very strange things. If you continue it the other way, it goes through what's called the Tomb of the Giants in Sardinia, amongst other sites. So this just shows you the Mount Shasta and the beautiful site that it is. But what's also interesting about Glastonbury and Mount Shasta, they both feature strongly on the rainbow serpent and the plumed serpent energy elements, because not only is Glastonbury called it's also called the sixth chakra, the third eye chakra. So the whole area we're talking about is literally 20 years ago was called the third eye chakra, before the unicorn was discovered with the third eye at Burrow-Mump. And also we have Mount Shasta here as well. So we've got another connection linking these two sites up. So it just keeps happening. It never ends. You keep finding things that just should not be there. But it's worth looking into the rainbow serpent. I do recommend it. There's some very interesting research done if you're into the whole idea of chakra points around the planet. And but anyway, I think it's time. Is it becoming time for dinner? Yes. So I want to just close up here and thank you for listening, and just thank you. Thank you. And just before you go, I just want to just say one thing, that we do take people to many of these sites around the world. It's something that I love to do. I would love showing you around. It's so cool. So we do tours, we do conferences, we get into this subject fully, we take you to these sites, and when you come with us, we will douse these energies and we will find exactly where they are. Come and talk to me outside, and I'll see you at 9:30, if not before, where I'll be doing my talk on the Giants.
Thank you. Another hand for Hugh. I know we got numbers bouncing around our head, and I'm not sure I can do 2 and 2 is 4 anymore after all those figures and numbers, but it is absolutely fascinating material, and we're so happy to be able to have it with us. Thank you very much. Don't forget, please go into the ARE